welcome back to another impactful night of the Impact Education Leadership. This is episode 207. I'm your host, ID34 Isaac III. Tonight's panelists are Dr. Isaac Carrier, Jerry Green, Brian Roberson, and Buddy Thornton, Publishers Change Agent Pro. Jerry Green, please say hello again to the people, sir.
How you doing? Greetings, everyone. Jerry O. Green, Black Student Advocate from Oklahoma City.
That's right. And Buddy Thornton, Publishers Change Agent Pro, please say hello again to the people, sir.
Good afternoon, and I am thrilled to be on this panel. We need to rock the boat.
That's right. That's right. And with no further ado, Dr. Isaac Carrier, please say hello again to the people, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Happy to be here with such awesome panelists. Hopefully, we will provide you with more than you can digest in one session and give you something to think about for days to come.
I know that's real. And in the building, we have Brian Roberson. Please say hello to the people.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Brian Roberson. All I know is I'm thanking God for all the blessings and the mercy He's bestowed, because I am drinking from my saucer, because my cup has overflowed to be with these brothers here tonight.
That was beautiful, sir. Well, the topic for tonight is high quality instruction in our public schools. Now, before we get started, let me throw this at the audience. There are 6 facets of understanding. I believe Dr. Wiggins said this. He said in those 6 facets of understanding, the first facet is, can you explain it before you can teach it? And then can you interpret what you're teaching? And then can you apply it? After that, what kind of perspective do you have? And then can you emphasize that? And finally, do you have enough self-knowledge in the particular topic that you're talking about to be valuable, to add to the conversation? Well, let's go around the panel. Let's talk about it. When you got the topic for the night, high quality instruction in public school, what came to your mind first? We're going around the panel. Who wants to take that first?
So my immediate thought was that, every student, this could fall in the buzzword category, but it is real. Every student everywhere deserves a high quality instruction, from start to finish. And that means we've got to get it right to set the foundation. And we've got to provide those learning opportunities that are truly of the highest quality all the way through 12, so that, 13 through 16 is a reality for those kids, should they choose that direction.
That was good. Who's next?
Chuck, I'll follow after you. Whenever I think about that question, I actually follow up with a question. What does high quality instruction look like?
Go ahead, I'll go last.
Go ahead,
buddy. Okay.
Yeah, you land the plane so well, I thought I'd lead you in.
Okay, go ahead. That's fine.
When you get a bunch of people who are forward-thinking people it's very hard for us to get out of each other's way. I'll just put it that way. Quality instruction has to look different for every student. That doesn't mean it has to look different for every teacher or every school district. If we take the concept of the starting line and we understand that high quality instruction for a child who is only scoring 35%, to him, high quality instruction will get him to 70. Well, you take a child who is routinely scoring in the 70s and 80s, high quality instruction is going to take him to the pinnacle of education. So we have to understand that within the concept of high quality, we have to have 1,000 different ways to define high quality. And I agree with the previous statement. What does it look like? I have to, as a parent and student coach, I have to take each student and where they are right this second and determine what does high quality look to them. And then I have to build an iterative path to get them up each step of that ladder. And it doesn't matter if they don't reach what some superstar student already had years ago. It only matters what is happening for that child. And so the teachers have to understand that the interpretation of high quality has to be left as an open vessel that each child gets to pour into.
Also good. Who's next? Come on, talk about it.
So when I first looked at the topic, I was thinking it's a sliding scale, and how can we talk about high quality instruction in public schools without saying what does that mean to every different student? So when we say high quality, now we're saying leaning, I would think it would be leaning more on the teachers than the student and then the community. And for the schools to work, it's a three-legged stool. It has to be the community, it has to be the household, it has to be the school district. So at the same time, we're talking high quality. How do we individualize that high quality education to what Buddy said, to meet the student where they are? Because many times what we see is when the student is not where the teacher wants them to be, then they're going to discipline that student out of that classroom and out of that district because it's a lot of more heavy lifting they got to do.
Ooh, listen, I got to throw a curveball now. Got to throw a curveball. Here we go. Curveball time. Now, we know that public schools have oversized classrooms. We know that public schools have lack of effective practices, lack of effective settings. We know that. And so some of the teachers are saying, in order to conquer this beast, this horn of dilemma, automation rules the nation. The panel is open. What's your thoughts about that? Let me say it again. Automation. I'm talking about LMS systems. I'm talking about those systems that are being bought now where the kids are plugging into these learning platform, LMS platforms that's automated, because automation is ruling the nation. Talk about it.
I'll throw something in and I'll let the academics behind me add their piece. When we're looking at LMS systems, and I own a private school, Pathway to Knowing, when we're designing an LMS, we are targeting a very specific target pool, and we are aiming at average. So my thought is that when we are aiming at average, we are doing a disservice to those fringe players on the bottom, and we're completely ignoring those that are above average. So how do you create high-quality instruction through an LMS? You don't. You only create average education, and the people who are above average are going to have to do what they will naturally do and go and get more, because that's what they do. They inherently go get more. And the people who are too low to hit average are the ones that we need to drag kicking and screaming up to average. But that's what's going to happen with LMSs in schools.
And see, I completely understand where you're coming from, buddy, and agree 100%. But I got a different view of the LMS as a, truly what it is, learning management system. Mm-hmm. My experience with LMS is, I've dealt with various, and I just see them as a vehicle, as a truly a vehicle to providing a path or an avenue to the content for which we are expecting students to ultimately learn. And so when you look at it that way, depending on how you utilize the tools within the LMS, what is available in terms of tools through that specific or the various learning management systems, then you can better serve and you can better target the different levels and groups of kids down to their individual level. I think for me, and I use it primarily, mostly now on the collegiate level for my online classes at the university that I teach at. And so what it allows me to do is to truly, yeah, I can do the whole group thing, but if I want to work with students individually, I'm able, the LMS, the system that they use or that the university uses allows me to do that. I think you hit the nail right on the head. It is about who and how we target and what we provide and the quality of what we provide. It does require more, Jerry, on the part of the instructors. Um, and part of that more is some freedom, right? Because the way I see K-12 LMS is being used is exactly how Buddy has stated, which is it's a holistic approach because at least here in Texas, it's dictated by the state now. Curriculums are dictated as high quality learning materials or something like that. Brian, you can correct me on the terminology on that. But at the end of the day, um, the autonomy of schools down to the individual teacher or classroom has been greatly diminished, if not completely taken away. Um, and so it's for me, it's about the approach. How do we utilize it, whatever the limits are? Because every system has its limits, but every system also has its its benefits. And how do we capitalize on the benefits of the LMS to reach each individual student's needs via that platform? Now, we're not restricted to that. We must be able to go beyond what that provides. And when we start talking about specific individualized education plans and instruction, but I think that if we take a deeper look at what the LMS, the system, the concept itself provides for us, we can capitalize on that. And I would say we must, because I think more and more, I spoke with someone yesterday who was a professor at a university, which is completely all online. Now, that's a very big break from what I truly believe is best in terms of learning, but that's where they are. And I think there's more and more that's just growing more and more in our profession.
With what you shared, when I think about the elements, I've see it from both sides. I always say, I think of it as a guide and not the absolute for learning or instruction. Being a high school principal during the pandemic, LMSs such as Google Classroom really helped us, whether you were in person or hybrid or virtual. Knowing that a student could log in through Google Classroom and see their teacher through Google Meet, upload their assignments, chat through discussions, have posts. It was a way to really organize instructional systems for our schools. With my doctorate at a university, we use Canvas. The professors posted, are you contributing to the discussions? Do you put your assignments there? And so some LMSs, or really all of them, are designed to be more of the guide and hopefully not the absolute. As Chuck said, we have platforms that are completely virtual, which I had an online degree for my master's program, 18 hours or 36 hours. And it was interesting. It was at the beginning of the whole virtual programs about 15 years ago. But I also know the benefit that majority of students would have sitting in a class. But when we look at, where education has gone and where our learners are going with the use of technology, I do think LMSs has a place. 15 years ago, it may have been Blackboard. Today, it's Canvas or Google Classroom or Schoology. And I really think that our students, as they are coming up and utilizing technology at an early age, they are more familiar and experienced with these systems than the really adults. And so it's becoming more of second nature for them. But I do think it has a place as a guide and not the absolute for our learning or instruction.
Well said. Well said. Who's next?
I'm just going to give an outside the box um, addition to what's being said. So the gentleman who just spoke said he got his degree 15 years ago or so. But who would have thought that the founder of University of Phoenix would look like a genius in 2020?
Oh yeah.
Being that if, and you all who are in academia, if you said you got a degree in 2016, 2017 from University of Phoenix, then people looked at you different. Like, oh, okay, you went there. But come pandemic, it validated that model because they were ahead of time, and who knew the pandemic was going to come. So I think as we look forward now, we have to look at and see what is out of the box thinking. And the other question I would ask is, are these students being trained on the first week or two how to use these LMSs? How to navigate them?
What you just said really, it had a flashback of a conversation I had a few months ago. Now, started my master's 2009. And what was interesting, I think that really, don't tell anybody, the easiest program, I knew I needed a master's in education, but the easiest program that I could start that summer, a few weeks after I graduated from my bachelor's, was an educational technology leadership degree. Now, whenever someone asks me, hey, what did you get your master's in? I always say educational leadership. But it was actually educational technology leadership. And I remember back in 2009 and 2010, when I crossed the stage, people said, what would you do with an educational technology leadership degree? And I said, honestly, I just needed the degree, so I already got my master's, so that when I want to move up, I'm ready. Not knowing, that was the conversation in 2010, but when I became a high school principal in the summer of 2010, and folks wondered how I could navigate leading a school through the pandemic with the onset of the technology and the hybrid and the virtual learning with no flaws, I had to remind them. I said, guys, 10 years ago, I went to school and got a degree that people said was pointless and that we would not use, not knowing that it set me up for what was to come a decade later. And so learning those systems at that time, even though I didn't know that it was needed, learning those systems at that time really propelled me in my first stint as a principal and prepared me for my second stint as a principal and what I do now in school. So what you just said really reminded me, sometimes you don't know what you're going through. You don't remember. I spoke with a gentleman earlier this evening about Macintosh, or not Macintosh, MacBooks, the MacBook laptop, and how I remember being in the first grade using a Macintosh computer. For years, I did not like that computer because it was a tower with a 5-inch screen, black and white, and all you could do was use Paint and Word, and I think it was another app. And I did not like it because I couldn't right-click. I needed 2 buttons. Not knowing that that's the device that I've now fallen in love with, but I had the training as a first grader in an elementary school classroom, just drawing and painting and typing a few words on Notepad, not knowing what was to later come. And so for our kids, I do believe that they get introduced, whether we know how much we're immersing them right now and how it'll benefit them later on. But it's been interesting just looking at my own personal experience of how I have been exposed to certain platforms or technology and how years later you really see the merit of that learning.
You know, this conversation is so riveting, but y'all know me. I want more.
Can I add a little bit to that?
Yeah, go ahead. And then after you do that, we about to go deep.
Okay.
Talk about it.
Yeah, no problem. I'm definitely older than the rest of the panel mates, And when I got my master's degree, I was almost 60 years old. And I got it through an LMS system, and I never stepped foot on the campus, ever. And my instructors were all over the world. I think 2 of them were in the United States, the other 8, some were in South Africa, some were in Israel, one was in Canada. The beauty of the LMS at the post-grad level is that it is geared to people who are motivated and inspired to be there and do the work.
Mm-hmm.
The problem the problem below that is that we don't know how to target such a wide, diverse net for students below age or 13th grade. My partner in the school that we have is getting her PhD in curriculum and LMS design, a PhD that did not exist 10 years ago. So yes, and she says the biggest challenge is not learning how to do the work, it's learning how to target the audience.
But you know, when you work as much together with somebody like we've done, it's a serendipity. I mean, it is a interplay. It is like, are you reading my mind? Are you reading my notes? What, like, you're taking words right out of my mouth. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't, because it's you know. But I'm still gonna go deep, because buddy, you did that.
Let me add something.
Come on,
hold that thought, Isaiah.
Talk about it.
So what Buddy just said reminds me, and my thought pattern is this: either you're a born entrepreneur, but you can't train an entrepreneur, because there's some gut feelings and gut decisions you would make as an entrepreneur that you can't learn in the classroom. You could take business courses and management courses, but I don't believe you could train an entrepreneur to be an entrepreneur. And what Buddy just said is, because we also saw that over the last, say, 10, 20 years, degrees in entrepreneurship. There's really business courses or management courses. Now they say it's entrepreneurial track. But it's the schools, this is my opinion, trying to catch up with the demand to stay relevant.
Ooh, that's hot. That's hot. Okay, let me. All right, no more.
Okay.
I'm taking the podcast back.
I'm
taking the podcast back. Write it down so you don't forget. This is the question I'm about to ask you, brilliant panelists. Okay, and I want you to think about this, because I'm gonna try to set it up. So this is the question I want you to think about. I'm gonna ask next. I want you to think about, how can we take all that has been said, this mass amount of content knowledge, and shape it into engaging, thought-provoking curriculum, right? That's going to work effectively no matter what type of setting these children are in. Think about this. An estimated 50,000 students are still missing from the U.S. schools since the pandemic began. Some reasons students are missing include homelessness, mental health issues, and needing to work or take on adult responsibilities. An estimated 6.5 million additional students became chronically absent. There was truancy wasn't being reported. According to data compiled from Stanford University in partnership with the Associated Press, they had it to say that these students still have not returned back to school. A lot of them haven't. They're like off the record, which makes the jobs of high expectation and high quality instruction that much more difficult for teachers, for school leaders, for stakeholders, for advocates, everyone involved. So how can we make this content knowledge that students have to learn? Here in Texas, we call them TEKs. How can we make it more engaging? How can we make it more thought-provoking? How can we make it more effective? And how can we make it work? The panel's open. Who wants to take that?
I think it's really important that we understand the concept of reverse engineering and well-defined social goals. What is the social goal of the education system? How does it impact the population moving forward? And how does it give us hope and closure for these kids? Because frankly, the world is not ours. It's really theirs. We're just kind of keeping it for them. So we have to reverse engineer any platform to reach the goals that is in front of them. And can we look in our broken crystal balls and see 2, 4, 8, 12 years ahead of us? No, probably not. But we can guess that they're going to be mired in a world where they're going to have to be using a heck of a lot of technology just to keep pace. And so we need to reverse engineer everything for the target in 2035. We can't do it for 2024. And that's the starting point. I'll drop it there.
Woo, that's hot. Come on, somebody.
We really have to take a step back. Like I said, I became a principal during the pandemic. I was known as the pandemic principal. I was great with the crisis management. And I remember sitting on campuses doing COVID tests for kids. Like I was doing it. The swab in the nose, I was doing it. And it became easy for students because honestly, during that time, we didn't know if we were going to make it out. We just wanted kids to be safe, to try to learn. But really, to try to learn, we just cared that you were safe. Can you make it to the school? Can you log on to let us know that you're okay? And in that experience, I believe that school systems and families and educators, everyone, we found excuses. We found a way out. We found ways for, well, if you can't get this in, we understand, just try. Well, you had a cohort, many cohorts of kids really, that were impacted because we lowered the standard. And it was understandable because we were trying to see what we were dealing with. Well, as we closed one year and said, okay, that was the trial run, and we opened up a new school year, we quickly learned that we lost students along the way. Students who had went virtual and somehow were still given credit to do just about nothing. For them, they found that this was acceptable behavior. I don't have to log in. I don't have to report back. I'm at home. All I have to do is maybe send a message by midnight and I would count. Well, many of those students found jobs. Many of those students entered the workplace, the workforce at that time. And so in many ways, I think back, did we provide too many outs and excuses for not only students, but families? Because that was something as school leaders, we had to go back to the drawing board. How do we re-engage parents? Because we told them, well, keep your baby at home, keep them safe. Is the school environment safe? And when you look at the politics that was involved, depending on where your school failed, in what state, in which community, were you advocating for a vaccine or a face mask or coming back into the building? It was so much going on.
You preaching. Come on, you preaching.
I'm just, my soul's getting happy when we think about it. And I can recall vividly the conversation from, I was fortunate in the first 2 years of the pandemic. I did not have one outbreak on my campus. Yes, students and staff, they were infected with COVID, but it always stemmed from them being at home with a family member or during holiday break. But we spoke about it so much that students knew and staff knew, hey, the principal said, Ms. Roberson said, if you feel this way, don't come to school. Just report it via email. People knew, don't come up on my campus any type of way. During the pandemic, I had close to 60 COVID tests myself because I wanted to model for my staff and students that I have to be my best for them. And that turned the page for them. Well, if he's getting the test, we might as well get the test. And so it really built this sense of community. We were all in. People wanted to show up. And with the school system that I was working with at that time, they asked, how is it that you have the most students on campus and the most staff members reporting on campus throughout the pandemic. I said because we built a system and a community of trust. We still have the same rigorous expectations for kids, but school is going to be fun with safety in mind. And so now that we can say we're 2-3 years removed, we're getting students back into the hang of it. We do see certain groups, I would say mainly at the high school and middle school level, that students lack those fundamental skills, reading skills that sometimes you needed that teacher sitting on side of you. You needed to be inside of a classroom. You had some behavioral concerns that needed to be addressed and maintained. And so we're getting students back into the groove and teaching them how to learn all over again. But the biggest piece, we focus so much on the kid and adapting to the current realities, but not enough time is truly spent on the adults, because we have many folks leading, whether principals, administrators, superintendents, you go up and down, all the way down to the classroom teacher, who are still trying to run school as school was and not as school is. And I think that is what is hindering our growth in school systems. Well, back in 2017 is far gone. 2017 is not our current reality. The technology that we use, our realities, that the experiences that we bring are totally different. So we cannot lead instruction or lead schools the way that we did even 5 years ago, because so much has changed. And so we have to truly find a way to change adult behaviors and get them to adapt to the new reality and the new challenges that are presented to our kids. If we start with the adults, it'll trickle down to the kids in a beautiful fashion. That's what I believe.
Let me park the car right there, because I know we got speakers. Hold on, let me park the car. Let me just say this, and I'm gonna get out the way. What you said, Dr. Roberson, was not only was it preaching, you were breaking stigmas. You were breaking stereotypes. I'm just gonna be honest with you. I'm an African American male, and in my community, it is so hard to get us to go to the hospital to get checkups and look at vital signs, get blood lab tests and all that. But you took over 50 COVID tests in front of your staff. That's leadership, and it's also breaking down stereotypes and stigmas. All right, the panel's open. Go ahead, let loose. Go for it. Go for it.
So, Brother Drone, you didn't know what you were doing when you got Carrier and Roberson on the same podcast.
Yeah, I did. Come on.
Okay. All right. So let me. I have a very similar story to what soon to be Dr. Roberson. I took a second stint as a school principal during COVID. And when in March of 2020, when the pandemic hit, there was a principal in a school district that we had worked in the same district many years prior to, but at different levels, and I didn't know who he was, never had ever heard of him. But it was his first principalship. He was at a school that was perpetually failing. New principal every year for about 6 years straight, and he was the sixth. He was the first person in that county, the entire county in Central Texas, to pass away from COVID. It just so happened there was a friend of mine that had just started in the district, and she was the chief of human resources, and so I reached out to her just to offer my condolences, and that was about it. Well, little did I know, a few weeks later, I'd get an email followed by a text message offering me the job, or asking me to consider the job. And I didn't want anything to do with it. I'll save y'all the rest of it. Ultimately, I went on, I did what they asked me to do. They offered me the job despite my attempts indirectly to sabotage it. And I become the principal of this perpetually failing school in Central Texas. Now, this is during the pandemic. I'm certainly not going to move my family there. I saw this as a God assignment. Didn't know anything specifically about the school, anything. When I got there, I just knew this. I had a staff. I was inheriting a staff who had lost their principal. I was inheriting a staff who was working in the school that was considered to be the worst school by far in that school district. I inherited a staff that they themselves were not trained, did not have the equipment they deserved. It was at the school that was the least cared for. And there's a story that I'll tell with that in just a moment. But it was a bad situation top to bottom. The first time I walked on that campus, I wasn't there 10 minutes and I was fighting mad because of the clear neglect. Now, different from Brother Roberson, I'm an old school principal with a new school attitude, always have had. The stuff that the pandemic required us to do, I started doing back in 2012. When it became available to us, I started utilizing it in 2012. So it wasn't new to me, and I wasn't afraid of it. I actually got excited about the fact that this gives us an opportunity to really change the game. There was a school, again, I won't say poor leadership, I will say lack of support in his leadership, in that school's leadership, because the people that were responsible for supporting those schools, they didn't change. They had been there. How do you let a school sit there in the mid? I take over in July. They've got $300,000 sitting there waiting to go back. The first thing I did was I didn't ask any questions about, beyond what they told me about devices and all of that. Piecing together iPads, piecing together laptops. I bought everybody, a brand new laptop. Every student, every teacher, every support staff got a brand new laptop. The reason being, I knew that at some point in time, there was a great likelihood that we would have to go remote. I didn't stop there. I asked the director of technology to come and have a meeting with me to make sure, one, help me make sure I get these devices on time. And two, I need you to buy the hotspots so that we can check out to our staff and our students, because not everybody in the hood got access to Wi-Fi. And coming up and sitting in the parking lot at the schoolhouse, well, that just wasn't smart, wasn't necessary. But that's what they did before because they were unprepared. Everybody was unprepared. I get that. But continuing to be unprepared, that's not okay. And so my intuition came true. We were the first school, all on the news and everything. I spent more time on the news when I was there than I ever have in my whole 20, almost 30-year career. It worked. Here was the problem, and this underscores what Brother Roberson was saying. The kids, they took off with it. It was the teachers, even the young teachers, who were very, very skeptical, afraid, could not see how to utilize this, how to capitalize on this as a vehicle, as a tool, as a major game changer, right? We experienced the same things, except I wasn't having it. When we went remote, we still had school. I still did my morning announcements. Everybody was expected to log in at a certain time every morning. I'm sitting here in Houston. They way out there 3 hours away, and we're having school. Because of the LMS, I could go in and out of classrooms. Because of the technology, I could see what teachers were doing with the kids. I could see what the kids were doing. I could direct message the kids that weren't on task and not doing what they were supposed to do. I did that. Now, when we got back on campus and they didn't come back, well, guess where I went? And guess where my staff went? We went to the house. There were expectations that you either were going to be there or you were going to be in class online as you were supposed to be, period. There were no, if you were sick, and only if you were sick. Otherwise, I wasn't having it. And when they realized that I wasn't having it, oh, they adhered to the expectation. See, when you say you set high expectations, you got to follow that up. You can't just sit there and allow, well, I can't do nothing. I tried. No, that's not ever going to get it. And that's whether we're talking about this whole situation that resulted from the pandemic or not. That's irrelevant. That's the way it should have always been. It should have always been that way, and it should always be going forward. Now, my frustration with the whole virtual opportunity and LMS and all of that is we want to run back to what was. And that frustrates me. That frustrates me to no end, because why are we wanting to run back to what was? It doesn't make sense to me. I saw a news report the other day on the national news talking about the science of teaching reading and proposing that to be this new thing, right? And it was going to transform this whole reading problem. Well, you know why the reading problem exists? It's because we stopped doing what the science of teaching reading taught us to do. We stopped doing that. I called my kindergarten teacher, didn't say hello, didn't say hi, Miss Shields. I said, when she answered the phone, Miss Shields, how did you teach us to read? How did you teach me to read? That's how I started the conversation. Because when you look at the foundation of it, all of the things that created us, because we're all of a certain age, all of the things that created us weren't so doggone bad. We, in education, are sometimes the biggest fools. Will fall for the biggest and the greatest, trying to keep up with the Jones, trying to keep up with this and that and the other, and we do things that don't make sense, like running back to a dying way of doing things. Now, to add insult to injury, we had 40, according to the MAP scores, the MAP assessment that we took that year. A school that had been perpetually failing, we had 45% growth in reading. In a pandemic, with 50% of my students at home. It was expectations. It was constant encouragement. It was constant teaching students and teachers. And that's what it took. Unfortunately, well, I won't say unfortunately, but because it turned out to be extremely fortunate. That school burned down. 3 weeks before the next school year started. So 3 weeks of the summer of 2021, before that school year started, my school burned down. 3 weeks later, I had moved in with another failing school and became the principal of both of those schools. And you know, if you're from the hood, you know the issues that might imagine some of the issues that we had to address. But at the end of the day, those schools who had been identified as IR came out of IR. It's about expectations, but expectations are nothing if it does not include effort.
Dr. Carey, let me say something. Let me say something, Dr. Carey. Yes, you're preaching. You're definitely doing that. But also, what you're saying to me is so spiritual, and I feel like it's also prophetic in nature, and it has a rhythm. Let me ask you this question: What? And I know I'm throwing you a curveball, but hear me. What are the myths and what are the realities about student-centered learning? Is it really only successful for the gifted and talented, or do all students benefit from it? That's my question.
So I think if you heard my last rant, all students benefit from that. One of the myths is that gifted students don't need help; that they'll do fine on their own, and that's readily accepted. But the reality is, the truth is, we wouldn't send a star athlete to train for the Olympics without a coach. Teachers matter, right? And gifted students need guidance, the same as students that are struggling or striving, to use my wife's word, to overcome whatever challenges they're facing. They all need support. And so learner-centered, meaning the learner is at the center of our efforts. We've got to make sure that we are addressing that to the very best of our ability. That means that that curriculum has to be right. Understanding of curriculum and how to utilize that has to be right. So that means training for teachers. That means support and coaching. But who's providing the support and the coaching? If the administrators are not true instructional leaders, then how can they be of benefit? If the instructional coach isn't really versed in knowing how to coach, then how much benefit and support can they provide? Another myth is that that gifted students somehow make every other student in the classroom smarter because they serve as a role model. On the surface, I get it, but the reality is average and below students don't look for gifted students in the classroom as role models. They actually shy away from those individuals. And what I've seen with my own eyes is that those individuals, they're not asking. It's kind of like the Charles Barkley syndrome. I'm not a role model, right? But so watching and relying on someone who's expected to succeed, it does little to increase a struggling student's sense of self-confidence. And gifted students benefit from the classroom interactions with peers in a similar performance level as they are taught. Now, here's another myth that acceleration placement options are socially harmful or especially particularly for gifted students. That's just not true. A lot of times the gifted students aren't receiving instruction at the level with the rigor that they require that keeps them engaged. But accelerating instruction, I've also, in addition to being a principal and leading schools from the central office level, I've been able to not have those responsibilities and go around the country as a consultant and be able to witness these things as an outsider, so to speak. And at the end of the day, it's the same wherever we go. Accelerated instruction just becomes another buzzword. It becomes another accepted term. Nobody really knows what it is. If you don't provide the foundation for kids that they need, if I'm struggling to read, if I'm in the 8th grade reading on a 2nd grade level, then dang it, why keep making me go to tutorials or to some special, remediation based on an assessment that I failed? And because it's not necessarily that I don't know the material, I can't access the material because when I read the material, I don't understand the words. I may not even be saying the correct words. And this last one gets me, it really gets me, is that gifted education programs are elitist. They're not elitist. If we want the brightest to rise to the top, then we've got to support them just the same as we are supporting the students that are struggling and with whatever challenges that they have. And so it's not elitist. It becomes elitist when we separate them and we glorify them and we don't push them. We don't allow them to grow. That's when it becomes elitist, right? And this comparison between this school and that school, let me tell you something. No two schools are alike. They may have similar characteristics, but no two schools are exactly the same. I don't care where you are, what the situation is, and it is completely based on some assessment scores, right? Right, and it's ridiculous to say that that's elitist as a whole. Now we know that if you go to school A, this magnet school or this particular private school, then you're getting a stellar education. But what you don't know is what's actually going on at that school.
Ooh, okay.
Those are some of the things.
The truth is so ugly.
Okay.
The truth is so because I'm about to go down to Buddy Thornton really quick, but let me talk about what was just said real quick, and let me tell you why y'all are all here. You're here giving your time for the society because that's who's listening to this podcast all over the world. But the reason why I was lucky enough to get this lineup is because I look at each one of you as architects, right? For me, you guys are architects because first off, when you plan, you don't rush. You're patient, right? And because you have to build. you guys are master builders. You build. And when you build, sometimes you got to improvise, but you're strategic though, and it's well thought out because there's no substitute for planning. So everything that you do has a purpose, and so it's not predictable, but it's strategic. And so what we just heard was the truth. And sometimes a lot of times the truth doesn't look good. It's ugly because it's reality. Buddy Thornton, let me ask you this question because I know the panel is hot right now. The stage is hot. What are some of the ways that we can identify failure when it comes to high quality instruction, especially in our public schools? You heard Dr. Carrier. I feel like when I say it was spiritual, I feel like that school that he got, the one that burned down, I feel like he took the school as far as it could go. And so you got people that's gifted like that the school it's gone as far as it can go, and no one else can come in and fill those shoes. And so it has to start from ground zero all the way back up. Buddy Thornton, what's your thoughts?
Well, first of all, let me say I was waiting for the collection plate to come down my pew there for a couple of minutes, and I didn't see it. But let me tell you, I want to add just one thing, and then I'll answer your question. I go back to the second grade to Mrs. Scarborough, and that is now 65 years ago. And I still know her name very well. I can picture her in my mind, and I can picture my mother in the classroom asking her if I could take what was known at that time as the SRA reading platform home to work on it at home, as well as I brought it back to school every day so all the students could use it. And they worked out an IEP when nobody even understood what an IEP was. And, it is the engagement level of the student that is being ignored. If we measured the frustration of the kids, we would be able to tell exactly where the failure points are. Number one, I don't know any kids who want to fail. I've been dealing with thousands of kids throughout the decades. And these kids, they do not want to fail. They believe the system is failing them. And so if we engage with them and we work with them to understand that first they want to know that we care about them and that we know that each one of them can be a success in some fashion. And then we can take the heart and soul of what Dr. Carrier portrayed, and we can embed that in the teachers and understand that, yeah, it may take a little extra time. Yes, it may take a little extra effort. But if we allow us to just say, this is what we've always done, this is what we're going to continue to do, and the kids are exhibiting frustration in their negative results, then we already know that the entire system is failing. So if you want to identify the failure, go to the kids and find out what their psychological profile looks like, not their academic profile looks like. And then if you want the solution is in looking at the future, building the LMSs and combining them as a hybrid system. And the kids who need hands-on, they need hands-on. The kids who can fly through, I have tried for 2 decades now to get people to pay attention to what I call iterative acceleration. If a child needs to be in 6th grade math and he's a 2nd grader, then he needs to be in 6th grade math. It's that single room school concept of the teacher is going to teach the child where they're at, not where they expect them to be. So a solution, we need to actually do the IEPs, but with a purpose. We need to actually understand the psychological profile of why a child believes they can or cannot do a thing, and then we need to find out how we can get them around that corner. And so it's going to take a combination of highly engaged professional educators and highly engaged professional people in the behavioral space to help understand how to bridge this gap, because these kids are really sophisticated. When I need something done on my cell phone, I hand it to my great-grandchild. I needed to project something onto my TV, and I couldn't do it, and my 7-year-old great-grandson said, Papa, let me have your phone, and he had what I wanted to look at on the TV in less than 30 seconds. And I'm like, okay, I guess I know where I'm going when I need that next. So we are not giving the kids their due, and because that's the old system and that's the thinking of we are the more knowledgeable other and we just need to keep them in their place and bring them along, that's out the window. When Vygotsky designed his platform of the more knowledgeable other and how we progress through the 3 stages of learning, he said, it doesn't matter where you are, it's where you want to go. I was a professional athlete for 27 years. Do you think I spent 1 minute of that 27 years without a coach? Absolutely not. Was I a world-class athlete? Absolutely. But without that coach, I wasn't going to grow. I wasn't going to sustain my performance. And the same thing applies to these kids.
You know what? We're going to use Vygotsky's reciprocal teaching strategies with this next question. Look, we are out of time, but let me ask this question as a whole, because the stage is still hot. How can public school leaders radically transform facets of school life, school culture, student culture, campus vision, and how can they do it from curriculum to instruction to culture? The panel's open. Who wants to take that first? We're about to get out of here.
I'll go first. This is Jerry. It goes back to my question that was asked on the sheet, and it's about team. What is going to help these students the best? And that's a team approach. Just like I think it's Dr. Carrier said, the expectations that they were leaning on the family and telling them, we still expect your student to do this. So I believe what a school truly engage and do place-based education, meaning going and meeting the parent at their apartment, at their house, at the family room, or what have you, versus everything needing to happen in the school sandbox. All the meetings having to happen at school, we're going to stay in the same place. So once you engage the family, because now you got expectations, and the parents are going to have the expectations on the kids, and when you lean that way, everybody is working for the betterment of the student. It's not a power struggle. It's not us versus them. It's not us versus the student. We all want the best thing for the student. And if we all work together, then we're going to have less discipline problems. We're going to have less financial problems, because now parents will come in and want to volunteer and lighten the load. And it's going to give instruction time more value. And with that, the parent also can learn something new. But if we just continue to go with this system we have, and I'll say this too, something I experienced during COVID. We're 3 weeks into COVID. I get on a call with administrators in California, and this administrator is still trying to figure out how to discipline a student and hasn't seen the student in 3 weeks, but worried about how to discipline the student. You know, that, and I also know of school districts, because kids were coming to get food, because that's where they got their meals many times, is at the school, Title I schools. When the kids came to pick up the meals, that's what they were accounting for ADA. I'll land the plane there.
You know, to answer the question, when I look at it, to truly transform schools, we got to look at curriculum innovation. We have to incorporate technology that is now available to us, to integrate digital tools and platforms to personalize the learning for our kids. It has to be personalized for them. They have the technology. We're just not bringing the instructional value to that technology and tools that they're using. Content needs to be relevant. As a consultant now, I live in Texas. I was a principal in Texas. I was a teacher in Texas, but I'm up in Illinois and Cedar Rapids. That's Iowa. I always forget the states, but Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana. And I go into these classrooms, and so many kids are just not getting it because the content is not relevant. There was a class today where the teacher was talking about inertia, and he was really trying to break down the concepts, and the kids just weren't getting it. He was talking about, the inertia, there's this force that is pushing a mass a certain way. That the larger the mass, the harder that pull is. And I said, well, you're talking about a school bus, and these kids don't ride the school bus to school. They walk or they get dropped off. But can you talk about inertia with a football player that's sprinting down the football field? A defender is racing after a wide receiver or a running back, and a wide receiver or running back drops on the dime and changes direction. What happens to that defender when all of his force is moving in one direction? How quickly can he shift? And the kids was like, oh, I get it now. And so we got to find a way to make the content relevant. Instructional transformation, as I mentioned earlier, we have to make sure that we're providing the best professional development so that we're bringing our teachers along, because it's so much that is changing, but our adults aren't always changing with them. We got to make sure that it's teacher-centered learning, because when I walk into classrooms, student-centered learning. So many classes that I walk into, the teachers, they are that sage on the stage doing all the talking, and kids are just sitting there with their cell phones hidden in their lap, not engaged. We got to make sure that we're providing opportunities for kids to use academic language, having discourse, sharing, defending their answers, building on each other's responses. That's where we have to go. And just cultural-wise, we have to be inclusive. There are so many schools where students do not feel seen or heard. And that goes back to the professional development. I don't think our adults know how to truly see or hear our kids, or sometimes they do and they're just afraid of the outside noise. And so for me, when we want to look at curriculum and instruction and cultural shifts, we got to start there.
Jerry Green, how we need to train our teachers, how we need to train our students. Come on.
I spoke already, but I was saying is the team approach, and I like what the gentleman just said a minute ago. Is I would when I go on site and have an opportunity to talk to students, I ask them how they like geometry, and they say, "Oh, I don't like that." I said, "Let me ask you a question. If you play a basketball, don't you have to gauge how the ball come off the rim? If you play a football and the guy go around the other end, are you going to try to get him on the 20 or hit him on the 40 on the other side of the field?" And they said, "Oh, the 40. I said, "Well, that's geometry. That's angles." And just what he said, we just got to make it relevant to the students. And then from that, they'll take it and run and engage. So it has to be relevant, has to be a team effort, with the three-legged stool being household, community, and school district. And with that, we also have to look at where we want these students to go and bring in the technologies, just like you said. Because there's a lot of things that they already plan on, and you can wrap your courseware around TikTok and everything else that they see.
Yeah.
And I'll stop there.
That was well said. I want to go to Dr. Isaac Carey, because you got to take us home, and I want you to talk about classroom observations. I want you to talk about the best practices, research-based practices, research-based instructional strategies. Are administrators using those really? Are they giving feedback to those teachers really? Are they doing it when they go into these rooms and do all these observations? We got so many systems, evaluation systems now in different states that monitor how teachers are being evaluated, right? But are they giving those teachers feedback that's growing those teachers, or are they just checking the box? Ooh, that was ugly. That was ugly. Come on, Dr. Carey.
Well,
take us home.
so here's the real answer to that question. There is no way to know that. There's no way, because let me go. I go back. I learned something in my master's classes back in '97, Brother Roberson. Um, and one of those things I learned was that there's no finite knowledge base in the field of education then, nor is there now, nor will there ever be. The reason it's impossible to answer that question, because again, as I stated earlier, every situation is different, every school is different, every teacher is different, every administrator is different. In a perfect world, the answer to that question would be yes. But if that were truly the case, then we would expect more teachers to be performing better. Thus, students would be performing better. I have had the good fortune and opportunity to go into schools not only in Texas where I'm from, but I've been in schools, particularly a large number of schools in Georgia and a few other states, and I see the same thing. I see disengaged administrators, even in professional development, preoccupied, most of them preoccupied in a good way with work stuff. And you're an assistant principal, if you've ever been one, yeah, it takes a lot more effort to focus on instruction. And I'll leave that right there. But I think that if the question can be answered, but it has to be answered on a case-by-case basis. And what that is are the observations truly taking place? Is there feedback truly being provided? Has that feedback been evaluated and reviewed in a collaborative way with the other observers, evaluators on campus? Are we calibrated in what we're looking for? Have we identified a common, all of the commonalities that these observations bring about? And are we responding to that with more of do this, do that, or are we responding to that with substantive, relevant professional learning opportunities for teachers as well as ourselves? Because if we have to apply professional learning from an outside source, then that should mean that I myself should be able to benefit from that and should be expected to be present to learn along with my teacher, right? That whole observation and feedback and all of that has to be a partnership. It only becomes supervision when it needs to become supervision. We can't call ourselves a team and not be truly working as a team. Now, as an administrator, I have specific responsibilities, and those things become situational. I won't get into the whole teaching method of that. But what I will say is, if we're going to expect the best from our teachers, then we got to make sure that we're giving them our best. And that starts with the campus leader and filters down. Teachers themselves, and I'm going to tell you, it's a beautiful thing when teachers hold each other accountable and the administrator never has to say anything, right? It's kind of like being a brother and a sister in the same house, and it's your night to wash the dishes. And when the dishes don't get washed, we all get punished, right? So I'm going to get in your butt, brother, because of you, now I got to do X, Y, and Z, and I would expect you to do the same, right? So we're all in this together. I wish I could say, yes, the answer to that question is yes, but I think it's clearly and an astoundingly no. It is not taking place with the regularity as it should. I'm not saying that the walkthroughs and observations aren't taking place, but the follow-up actions, well, if they're happening, they need certainly some attention. And anybody who's ever had the opportunity to do that, like Brian is having the opportunity to do now, I think would clearly understand what I'm saying is when you do that and you do that consistently and you follow the plan, Jerry, the plan can work, but you got to work it.
Yep.
Very well said. Okay, we out of time. We about to get out of here. Listen, what are the takeaways for the night from this conversation? This conversation was so powerful, you can't even feel it. Okay, it's not that you're too dumb to feel it. It's just you just can't even feel it because it's so powerful. All right, what's the takeaways for tonight? Who wants to go first?
One of the first things I was taught when I was starting to work with kids was that everybody knows exactly what they need to do. My thoughts about tonight's conversation is that it is sad that we have to remind people of what those obligations are. You know, I wrote a book, and in that book I said, the only job a teacher, a parent, and a caregiver has is to deliver a fully functional adult to society. My question is, why can't it just be that simple? Focus on the kids. There's no reason we should be telling people that.
That was deep. Oh, that was deep. Who's next?
I jump in. I'll keep it short. My takeaway is the work doesn't stop, but we're committed to the work. And it is really just that simple. The work doesn't stop, but we're committed to it.
Oh, that's ministry or administration. Who's next?
It's been a powerful conversation, and there is opportunity to grow, opportunity to continue to help these babies, and opportunities to help the professionals help these babies. And I still feel encouraged about that.
Impact of Educational Leadership Podcast. Facebook,